Sometimes the moments that change everything happen when we are at our most vulnerable. When we believe we are surrounded by love and support, reality can reveal itself in the cruelest way possible. This is a story about trust, betrayal, and the unexpected strength we discover within ourselves when everything we believed in crumbles. What began as a health crisis became the starting point of a journey no one could have predicted. Before we begin this story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments where you are listening to this story from. We will post new stories every day. My name is Jennifer, and I never imagined that one of the worst moments of my life would become the catalyst for the best decision I would ever make. But I am getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the moment everything changed. The hospital room was cold. Not just physically cold, though the air conditioning seemed to be working overtime, but cold in that sterile, impersonal way that medical facilities always feel. The walls were a pale cream color, probably chosen by some interior designer who thought it would be soothing, but to me, it just looked lifeless. The fluorescent lights hummed softly overhead, and I could hear the distant sounds of nurses, footsteps in the corridor, outside the occasional beep of medical equipment, the muffled conversations of doctors making their rounds. I had been admitted 3 days earlier. What started as persistent stomach pain had escalated quickly into something the doctors were still trying to fully diagnose. There had been tests, so many tests, blood work, imaging scans, consultations with specialists. I felt like a specimen being studied rather than a person being cared for. The uncertainty was almost worse than the physical discomfort. Almost. I was lying in the hospital bed, wearing one of those gowns that somehow manages to be both too big and too revealing at the same time. My long brown hair, usually carefully styled, was pulled back in a messy ponytail. I had not worn makeup in days, and I could see my pale reflection in the darkened television screen mounted on the wall opposite my bed. I looked tired. I looked sick. I looked exactly like someone who had spent 3 days in a medical facility, being poked and prodded and told to wait for more results. The IV in my left arm was a constant reminder of my situation. A thin tube connected to a bag of clear fluid hanging from a metal stand beside my bed. The tape holding the needle in place had started to irritate my skin, but I had stopped noticing it as much. You get used to discomfort when you have no choice. It was a Thursday afternoon in early November. Through the single window in my room, I could see gray clouds gathering over Portland. Rain was coming, which was hardly unusual for Oregon at this time of year. The trees visible from my third-floor window were nearly bare, just a few stubborn leaves clinging to the branches. There was something melancholic about the view, matching my mood perfectly. I had called my husband, David, that morning. He had promised he would come visit after work. We had been married for 7 years, together for 9. He was a financial analyst at a downtown firm, the kind of job that came with long hours and high stress, but also a comfortable salary that had allowed us to buy a nice house in a good neighborhood. We had always talked about starting a family, but somehow the timing had never seemed quite right. First, we were establishing our careers. Then we were saving for the house. Then we were settling into the house. There was always something. Now, lying in this hospital bed, I wondered if we had been making a mistake. Maybe we should have prioritized differently. Maybe we should have focused more on building our life together and less on building our bank account. I heard footsteps approaching my room, and then David appeared. In the doorway, he was wearing his work clothes, a dark gray suit with a blue tie that I had given him for his birthday 2 years ago. His light brown hair was neatly combed, and he carried his leather briefcase in one hand. He looked every bit the successful professional. He also looked uncomfortable. He walked into the room slowly, as if he were unsure whether he should be there. He set his briefcase down on the chair near the window, and then approached my bed. He did not kiss me. He did not take my hand. He just stood there, looking at me with an expression I could not quite read. I felt a flutter of unease in my chest, separate from the physical pain I had been experiencing. Something was wrong. I could sense it in the way he held himself, in the way he avoided making direct eye contact. "Hello, David," I said, my voice sounding weaker than I intended. "Thank you for coming." He nodded, but did not say anything right away. He pulled the visitor's chair closer to my bed and sat down, his movements stiff and mechanical. He placed his hands on his knees and stared at them for a long moment. "How are you feeling?" he finally asked. But the question sounded hollow, as if he were asking out of obligation rather than genuine concern. "About the same," I replied, still waiting for more test results. "The doctors think they will have a better idea tomorrow about what is causing everything." He nodded again, but I could tell he was not really listening. His mind was somewhere else entirely. The silence between us stretched out, becoming increasingly uncomfortable. Outside, I could hear a nurse talking to someone in the hallway, discussing medication schedules and dietary restrictions, normal hospital sounds. But in my room, the silence was deafening. "David, what is wrong?" I asked, unable to bear the tension any longer. "You seem distant. Is everything okay at work?" He looked up at me then, and I saw something in his eyes that made my stomach clench. It was not concern. It was not love. It was something closer to resignation, maybe even guilt. "Jennifer, we need to talk," he said, and those 4 words sent a chill through me that had nothing to do with the hospital. Air conditioning. I gripped the thin blanket covering me, my knuckles turning white. Part of me wanted to tell him to stop, to not say whatever he was about to say, but another part of me, the part that had sensed something was wrong for months now, maybe even longer, needed to hear it. "Okay," I said quietly. "I am listening." He took a deep breath, and I watched his chest rise and fall. He was gathering courage, I realized. Gathering courage to say something that he knew would hurt me. When he finally spoke, his words came out in a rush, as if he needed to get them out before he lost his nerve. "I have been thinking a lot lately," he began. "About us, about our marriage, about where we are and where we are going, and I have realized something I probably should have acknowledged a long time ago." He paused, and I felt my heart hammering in my chest. I wanted to interrupt him, to stop him from continuing, but I could not find my voice. "I am not happy, Jennifer," he said, and the words hit me like a physical blow. "I have not been happy for a while now. I care about you. I do. But I do not think I love you the way a husband should love his wife. I think maybe I never did. Not really. Not the way you deserve." The room seemed to tilt around me. I could hear a ringing in my ears. And for a moment I thought I might actually pass out. My vision blurred, and I realized there were tears forming in my eyes. "What are you saying?" I managed to whisper. He looked away from me, unable to meet my eyes. "I am saying that I think we made a mistake. I think we got married for the wrong reasons. We were comfortable together. We had been dating for a while, and it seemed like the natural next step. Everyone expected it. Our families were excited. It just felt like what we were supposed to do. But I do not think either of us really stopped to ask if it was what we wanted. I felt like I could not breathe. The IV in my arm suddenly felt much more uncomfortable, the needle seeming to dig deeper into my vein. I wanted to rip it out, to get up from this bed, to run away from this conversation. But I was trapped, both physically and emotionally. "You are telling me this now?" I said, my voice breaking. "You are telling me this while I am lying in a hospital bed, sick and scared and vulnerable. You could not wait until I was home. You could not wait until I was better." He flinched at the accusation in my voice, but he did not deny it. "I know the timing is terrible," he said. "I know this is probably the worst possible moment, but I could not keep pretending anymore. I could not keep coming here and acting like everything was fine when it is not. You deserve honesty, Jennifer. You deserve to know the truth. The truth," I repeated bitterly. "The truth is that you are abandoning me when I need you most. The truth is that you are more concerned about your own feelings than about supporting your wife through a health crisis. The truth is that you are a coward, David." His face reddened, and I saw anger flash in his eyes. "Then maybe you are finally seeing the real me," he said, his voice sharp. "Maybe this is who I have always been, and you just did not want to see it. We have both been living a lie, Jennifer. At least I am willing to admit it." I turned my head away from him, staring at the wall. Tears were streaming down my face now, and I did not bother to wipe them away. I felt hollowed out, as if someone had reached inside me and removed something essential. The physical pain I had been experiencing for the past few days was nothing compared to this. This was a different kind of agony entirely. "I think you should leave," I said quietly. "Jennifer, he started to say, but I cut him off. No, I said more firmly, turning back to look at him. You came here to unburden yourself. You came here to make yourself feel better by being honest. Well, you have done that. You have been honest. Now leave. I do not want you here anymore. He stood up slowly, picking up his briefcase. For a moment, he just stood there, looking at me as if he wanted to say something else. But whatever words he was searching for did not come. He simply nodded, turned, and walked out of the room. The sound of his footsteps fading down the hallway was the loneliest sound I had ever heard. I lay there in the hospital bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling the tears continue to fall. The fluorescent lights above me blurred into shapeless spots of brightness. My mind was racing, replaying his words over and over. I have not been happy. I do not think I love you the way a husband should love his wife. I think maybe I never did. How long had he felt this way? Months, years. Had our entire marriage been a facade? Had every I love you been a lie? Had every moment of intimacy been an act? The questions swirled in my mind, each one more painful than the last. A nurse came in shortly after David left. She was a woman in her 50s, with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a bun. She took one look at me and seemed to understand that something beyond my physical condition was wrong. "Honey, are you all right?" she asked gently, checking my vital signs on the monitor beside my bed. I wanted to tell her everything. I wanted to break down and sob and have someone, anyone, tell me that it would be okay. But instead, I just shook my head slightly and said, "I am fine, just tired." She gave me a look that suggested she did not believe me for a second, but she did not push. She adjusted my IV, made some notes on her chart, and told me to press the call button if I needed anything. Then she left, and I was alone again with my thoughts. Night fell over Portland, and the rain that had been threatening finally arrived. I could hear it pattering against my window, a steady rhythm that might have been soothing under different circumstances. But now, it just sounded like the sky was crying along with me. I thought about the life David and I had built together, the house we had bought, with its modern kitchen and the small backyard where we had talked about maybe getting a dog someday, the vacations we had taken on, mostly to safe, predictable destinations like beach resorts and wine country, the dinners with friends where we played the part of the happily married couple, the holidays with our families, where we smiled for photos and exchanged appropriate gifts. Had any of it been real? Or had we both been going through the motions, too afraid or too comfortable to admit that something fundamental was missing? I realized, lying there in that cold hospital room, that I had been feeling it too. Maybe not as strongly as David, or maybe I had just been better at ignoring it, but the signs had been there. The way we had stopped really talking to each other, our conversations limited to logistics and schedules, the way our physical intimacy had become routine and infrequent, the way we seemed to exist in parallel rather than together, two people sharing a space but not really, sharing a life. But I had thought that was normal. I had thought that was what marriage looked like after the initial excitement wore off. I had thought we were stable, secure, building something lasting. I had not realized that we were actually slowly drifting apart, our connection fraying one thread at a time until there was nothing substantial left to hold us together. And now, in the worst possible moment, when I was at my most vulnerable, when I needed support and comfort and reassurance, David had chosen to sever what little remained. I closed my eyes, exhausted from crying, from thinking, from feeling. The medication they had given me for the pain was starting to make me drowsy, pulling me toward sleep. As I drifted off, my last conscious thought was a question that would haunt me in the days to come. What happens now? I woke up the next morning to pale sunlight filtering through the hospital window. The rain had stopped sometime during the night, leaving behind a clean, washed-out sky. For just a moment, still groggy from sleep and medication, I forgot where I was and what had happened. Then reality crashed back down on me like a wave, and I felt the weight of it pressing against my chest. David's words echoed in my mind. "I have not been happy. I do not think I love you the way a husband should love his wife. I think maybe I never did." I stared at the ceiling, trying to make sense of how we had arrived at this point. When had things gone so wrong? Or had they ever been truly right to begin with? My mind drifted back to the beginning, to the first time I met David. It was almost 10 years ago. at a mutual friend's birthday party in downtown Portland. I had just turned 26, fresh from completing my SUMI, master's degree in education and starting my first real teaching position at a middle school. I was excited about my career, optimistic about my future, and admittedly a bit lonely. Most of my friends from college had moved away or gotten caught up in their own lives, and I was looking for connection. The party was at a trendy restaurant with dim lighting and overpriced cocktails. I had almost not gone, feeling tired after a long week of classes and grading papers, but my friend Sarah had insisted. She said I needed to get out more, to meet new people, to have some fun. So I had put on a navy blue dress that Sarah assured me looked great, applied more makeup than I usually wore, and forced myself out the door. David was there with a group of his co-workers. He was standing near the bar, laughing at something one of his colleagues had said, and when he smiled, I noticed how it reached his eyes. He looked confident, successful, put together. He was wearing a crisp white shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, and there was something about the casual elegance of it that caught my attention. Sarah, who had known David from a college study group, introduced us. He shook my hand firmly and made direct eye contact, and I remember thinking that he seemed genuinely interested in talking to me. We ended up spending most of the evening in conversation, standing in a corner of the restaurant while the party buzzed around us. He asked me about my work, and I found myself talking animatedly about my students, about the challenges and rewards of teaching, about my hopes for making a real difference in young people's lives. He listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions, seeming genuinely engaged. When I asked about his work in finance, he was honest about finding it less personally fulfilling than he had hoped, but he appreciated the stability and the intellectual challenge of it. We talked about books, movies, our families, our college experiences. He was easy to talk to, and the conversation flowed naturally. There were no awkward silences, no forced topics. It felt comfortable, effortless even. By the end of the night, he had asked for my number, and I had given it to him without hesitation. He called me 2 days later, and we went on our first official date that weekend. He took me to a small Italian restaurant that he said had the best pasta in Portland. He was right. We shared a bottle of red wine and talked for hours, long after we had finished eating. The waitstaff was clearly ready for us to leave, but we were too absorbed in our conversation to notice the subtle hints. Looking back now, I tried to remember what I had felt during those early dates. Was it love? Or was it something more practical, more calculated? I had been attracted to him, certainly. He was handsome in a conventional way, with a pleasant face and kind eyes. But more than that, he had represented something I wanted at that point in my life. Stability, partnership, a future that made sense. I had watched so many of my friends struggle, through their 20s, dating men who were unreliable or immature or commitment-phobic. David was none of those things. He had a good job, a nice apartment, clear goals for his future. He was responsible, dependable, mature. He seemed like exactly the kind of man I should be with. And I think, if I was being completely honest with myself now, that was the problem. He seemed like the kind of man I should be with. Not necessarily the kind of man I desperately wanted to be with. There was a difference, a crucial difference that I had not allowed myself to acknowledge at the time. Our relationship progressed in a logical, orderly fashion. We dated for 6 months before he suggested we move in together. It made financial sense. He pointed out, we were spending most nights together anyway, and splitting rent would help us both save money. I agreed, telling myself that I was being practical, mature, making smart decisions. We found a nice 2-bedroom apartment in a quiet neighborhood. David took the extra room as a home office, filling it with his computer equipment and filing cabinets full of financial documents. I set up a small reading nook by the living room window, where I would grade papers on weekend mornings while drinking coffee. Living together was easy. We fell into comfortable routines. Quickly, David would leave for work early, usually before I was fully awake. I would get ready for school, pack my lunch, and head to the classroom. In the evenings, we would meet back at the apartment. Sometimes we would cook dinner together, following recipes from a cookbook his mother had given us. Other times we would order takeout and watch television shows that we both found mildly entertaining, but not particularly engaging. We rarely argued. In fact, I could not remember a single significant fight during our first year of living together. At the time, I had thought that was a good sign, evidence of our compatibility. Now, I wondered if it was actually a warning sign. Maybe we did not fight because we did not care enough to fight. Maybe we were so comfortable that we had stopped pushing each other, challenging each other, really engaging with each other on any meaningful level. After we had been living together for about 18 months, David proposed. It was not a grand romantic gesture. We were at dinner at the same Italian restaurant where we had gone on our first date. The meal was pleasant, but unremarkable. After we finished eating, David reached across the table, took my hand, and said that he thought we should get married. Not will you marry me? With all the emotion and vulnerability that question implied. But we should get married, as if it were the next logical step in a business plan we were executing together. He had not gotten down on one knee. He had not prepared a speech about his feelings. He had simply produced a small velvet box from his jacket pocket and opened it to reveal a diamond ring. It was a nice ring, tasteful and expensive looking. Exactly the kind of ring a successful financial analyst would buy for his future wife. I had said yes. Of course I had said yes. What reason did I have to say no? David was a good man. He treated me well. He was responsible and stable. We got along well. Our families liked each other. It made sense. But had I been in love with him? Had my heart raced when I saw him? Had I felt that overwhelming sense of rightness that people described when they talked about finding their person? I was not sure. Maybe. Or maybe I had just convinced myself that what we had was enough, that stability and compatibility were more important than passion and intensity. Our wedding was 6 months later, in late spring. It was a traditional ceremony at a historic church in downtown Portland, followed by a reception at a hotel ballroom. We invited about 150 people, mostly family and friends, a few colleagues from our respective workplaces. Everything was tasteful, elegant, appropriate. The flowers were beautiful. The food was good. The music was pleasant. People danced and celebrated and told us how perfect we were together. I wore a white dress that my mother helped me pick out. David wore a black tuxedo. We exchanged vows that we had found online, standard promises about love and commitment and staying together through good times and bad. We meant them when we said them. At least, I think we did. Our honeymoon was in Hawaii, a week at a resort on Maui. We spent our days lying on the beach, swimming in the ocean, taking tours of the island. We took photos of ourselves in front of scenic views, smiling and holding hands, creating evidence of our happiness to show to everyone back home. At night, we had dinner at nice restaurants and then returned to our hotel room for obligatory honeymoon intimacy that felt more like checking items off a list than genuine passion. When we returned to Portland, we moved into our first house. David had been saving carefully, and combined with my savings and a loan from his parents, we had enough for a down payment on a modest 3-bedroom home in a safe, middle-class neighborhood. We spent weekends at furniture stores, picking out couches and dining tables and bedroom sets. We painted walls, neutral colors. We planted flowers in the front yard. We were building a life together, creating the appearance of domestic bliss. But underneath the surface, were we actually happy? I thought about the conversations David and I had during those early years of marriage. They were mostly practical discussions. What bills needed to be paid, what groceries we needed to buy, what we were doing for the upcoming holidays, when we needed to schedule various appointments. We talked about logistics constantly, but rarely about feelings, dreams, fears, hopes. We had dinner together most nights, sitting at our carefully selected dining table, eating food we had prepared or ordered, and talking about nothing that mattered. David would tell me about difficult clients or frustrating colleagues. I would tell him about challenging students or administrative headaches at school. We would sympathize with each other in vague, general ways, but we did not really dig deeper. We did not ask each other how we truly felt or what we really wanted from our lives. Intimacy became increasingly infrequent. At first, maybe once or twice a week, then once a week, then every couple of weeks, then even less. We always had excuses. We were tired from work. We had early meetings the next day. We were not feeling well. We did not talk about the growing distance between us. We just quietly accepted it as normal. As what happened in long-term relationships, we took vacations every year, usually to safe, predictable destinations. Beach resorts where we would lie in the sun and read books and have pleasant but forgettable meals. Wine country where we would tour vineyards and taste wines we could not really distinguish between, and buy bottles we would never drink. European cities where we would check off tourist attractions like items on a grocery list, taking photos but not really experiencing anything deeply. We celebrated anniversaries with dinners at nice restaurants. We gave each other gifts for birthdays and holidays. Thoughtful but impersonal items like kitchen appliances or clothing or gift cards. We attended family gatherings and social events, presenting ourselves as a happily married couple. We smiled in photos. We held hands when it was expected. We played our roles convincingly. But were we truly connected? Were we truly partners in any meaningful sense? Or were we just two people who had decided it was easier to stay together than to face the uncertainty and disruption of being apart? I thought about the moments when I had sensed something was wrong, but had pushed those feelings aside. Like the time, about 3 years into our marriage, when I had asked David what he wanted out of life, really wanted, and he had looked at me with confusion and said he did not understand the question, or the time I had suggested we try marriage counseling, just to improve our communication, and he had dismissed it as unnecessary, saying we did not have any real problems, or the countless small moments when I had reached for his hand, and he had not reached back, when I had tried to start a deeper conversation, and he had changed the subject, when I had looked at him across the dinner table and realized I had no idea what he was thinking or feeling. The signs had been there all along. I just had not wanted to see them. Or maybe I had seen them but had convinced myself that this was normal, that this was what marriage looked like, that passion and intensity were for young lovers, and that mature adults settled into comfortable routines and practical partnerships. Lying in that hospital bed, I realized how wrong I had been. This was not what marriage should look like. This was not partnership. This was not love. This was two people going through the motions, fulfilling roles without real connection or intimacy or genuine understanding. And David had finally admitted it. He had finally said out loud what we had both probably known for years, but had been too afraid or too comfortable to acknowledge. We had made a mistake. We had built a life together on a foundation of practicality and convention rather than real love and authentic connection. The door to my room opened, interrupting my thoughts. A doctor I had not seen before entered, carrying a tablet and wearing the same expression of professional concern that all medical professionals seem to master. She introduced herself as Dr. Martinez and told me she had reviewed my test results. As she explained her findings, I tried to focus on her words, but my mind kept drifting back to David. The diagnosis was not as serious as I had feared. It would require treatment and lifestyle changes, but it was manageable. I should be able to go home in a day or two. Home. The word felt hollow now. What did home even mean anymore? The house I shared with David? That did not feel like home now. It felt like a stage set, a carefully constructed illusion of domestic happiness that had been exposed as false. After Dr. Martinez left, I picked up my phone for the first time since David had walked out the previous evening. There were several text messages waiting for me. One from my sister Amy, asking how I was feeling. One from Sarah, my friend, who had introduced me to David all those years ago. One from a colleague at school, sending well wishes. And one from David. I stared at his name on my screen, my thumb hovering over the message. Part of me wanted to delete it without reading it, but I needed to know what he had to say. I opened it. The message was short, formal, distant. He wrote that he hoped I was feeling better, that he had been thinking about our conversation, and that he thought it would be best if he stayed with a friend for a while when I came home, to give us both some space to figure things out. He said he would come by the house at a time when I was not there to pick up some clothes and essentials. I read the message 3 times, looking for any hint of emotion, any suggestion that he was struggling with what had happened, any indication that he regretted the pain he had caused. There was nothing. It was as cold and practical as everything else in our relationship had been. I set the phone down and looked out the window. The sun was fully up now, and I could see people walking on the sidewalk below, going about their normal Friday routines. Students heading to classes, professionals walking to work, parents pushing strollers, everyone living their lives, completely unaware that my entire world had just shattered. But Had it really shattered? Or had it been broken all along, and I was only just now seeing the cracks? A nurse came in to check my vitals, the same kind woman from the previous night. She smiled at me warmly, and I found myself unexpectedly grateful for her presence, for her simple human kindness. "You look a bit better today," she said encouragingly. "More color in your cheeks." "I am getting there," I replied, and I realized as I said it that I was not just talking about my physical condition. She finished her checks and was about to leave when I surprised myself by asking her a question. "Have you ever felt like you were living someone else's life?" She paused in the doorway and turned back to look at me. Her expression was thoughtful, understanding. She walked back to my bedside and spoke quietly. "I think everyone feels that way sometimes, honey. We make choices when we are young, based on what we think we want or what we think we should want. And then years pass, and we wake up one day and wonder how we got here. The question is what you do when you realize it." "What did you do?" I asked. She smiled, but there was sadness in it. "I stayed too long in a situation that was not right for me. I convinced myself that comfort was the same as happiness. By the time I finally made a change, I had wasted years. Do not make the same mistake I did." "How do you know when it is time to make a change?" I asked. She reached out and gently squeezed my hand. "You already know," she said. "You have known for a while. You are just finally ready to admit it." After she left, I sat with her words. She was right. I had known. Maybe not consciously, maybe not in a way I had allowed myself to fully acknowledge, but I had known that something fundamental was missing in my marriage to David. I had just been too scared or too comfortable to do anything about it. Now the choice had been made for me. David had opened the door. He had said the words neither of us had been brave enough to say, and now I had to decide what came next. I picked up my phone again and opened a new message. This time, I texted my sister Amy. "I need to talk to you. Can you come visit me in the hospital today? It is important." Her reply came almost immediately. "Of course. I will be there in an hour. Are you okay?" I thought about how to answer that question. Was I okay? No, not even close. My marriage was over. My husband had just confessed he had never really loved me. Everything I had thought was stable and secure had revealed itself to be an illusion. But at the same time, something inside me felt lighter. The pretense was over. The performance was done. I did not have to keep trying to make something work that had never really worked to begin with. I typed my response. "I will be okay. I just need family right now." And as I sent the message, I realized that might actually be true. I might actually be okay. It would not happen immediately, and it would not be easy, but maybe, just maybe, I would come out of this stronger than before. The chapter of my life with David was ending. It was painful and messy, and not at all what I had planned. But perhaps it was exactly what needed to happen. Perhaps sometimes things need to fall apart before they can come together in a better way. Amy arrived at the hospital exactly when she said she would. My younger sister had always been punctual, reliable in ways that made me feel both grateful and slightly inadequate. She was 29, 3 years younger than me, and in many ways, we were complete opposites. Where I had always been cautious and conventional, Amy was bold and spontaneous. Where I planned everything carefully, she embraced uncertainty. Where I had settled into what seemed like a safe, predictable life, Amy had traveled the world, changed careers twice, and seemed genuinely happy with her choices. She walked into my hospital room carrying a paper bag from my favorite bakery and a concerned expression that softened when she saw me sitting up in bed, no longer connected to the IV. "You look better than I expected," she said, setting the bag on the rolling table beside my bed. "I brought you those lemon scones you love. I figured hospital food was probably making everything worse." "Thank you," I said, and my voice cracked unexpectedly. The simple kindness of her gesture, the thoughtfulness of remembering. My favorite pastry suddenly felt overwhelming. Tears started forming in my eyes before I could stop them. Amy was beside me in an instant, sitting on the edge of the hospital bed and wrapping her arms around me. Hey, what is going on? You said it was important. Is it the diagnosis? Are you going to be okay?" I nodded against her shoulder, unable to speak for a moment. "The diagnosis is manageable," I finally said. "It is not. About that. It is David. I felt Amy stiffen slightly, and when I pulled back to look at her face, I saw something there that surprised me. It was not shock. It was more like confirmation of something she had suspected. What did he do? She asked quietly. So I told her everything. About David's visit the previous evening. About his confession that he had never really loved me. About the coldness and timing of his revelation. About his text message suggesting he move out. The words poured out of me in a rush, and Amy listened without interrupting, her hand holding mine tightly. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something I did not expect. "Jennifer, I need to tell you something, and you are probably going to be angry with me for not saying it sooner." I looked at her, confused. "What do you mean?" She took a deep breath. "I have never liked David. I have been civil to him because he was your husband and I loved you, but I never thought he was right for you. I never thought he treated you the way you deserved to be treated." "What are you talking about?" I said, feeling defensive despite everything that had happened. "David always treated me fine. He was never cruel or abusive or anything like that." "That is exactly the problem," Amy said. "He treated you fine. Just fine. Not amazing, not special, not like you were the most important person in his life. Just fine. And you deserve so much more than fine, Jennifer." I started to protest, but she held up her hand. "Please, let me finish. I have watched you two together for 7 years. I have seen the way he looks at you, or rather, the way he does not look at you. I have heard the way he talks to you, always pleasant but never truly engaged. And I have noticed how you dimmed yourself around him, how you stopped talking about your dreams and passions because he never really seemed interested. That is not true," I said weakly, but even as I said it, I knew she was right. "Jennifer, do you remember your 30th birthday?" Amy asked. "You had mentioned weeks before that you wanted to go to that new art gallery downtown, the one featuring local artists. You were so excited about it, and what did David do? He took you to the same steakhouse he always took you to for special occasions, bought you a necklace you would never wear because it was not your style, and called it a day. He did not even remember that you had talked about the gallery. I did remember. I had mentioned it several times, shown him the gallery's website, talked about specific artists whose work I wanted to see, and David had either not been listening or had not cared enough to remember. At the time, I had told myself it did not matter, that the thought counted, that I was being ungrateful to feel disappointed. And what about last Christmas?" Amy continued. "You spent weeks planning the perfect holiday, decorating the house, buying thoughtful gifts for his entire family, cooking an elaborate dinner, and he got you a gift card to a department store. A gift card. Jennifer, that is what you get for an acquaintance, not for your wife. I had made excuses for that too. David was not good at gift giving. He was practical. He wanted me to be able to choose something I really wanted. But Amy was right. It had been thoughtless, impersonal, a clear sign that he had not put any real effort into thinking about what I might like. Or what about the time your principal offered you that opportunity to lead the new literacy program at school?" Amy said. "You were so excited about it, but it would have meant some evening meetings and weekend workshops. Do you remember what David said?" I remembered. He had said it sounded like a lot of extra work for not much extra pay. He had questioned whether it was really worth the time commitment. He had never actually forbidden me from taking the position, but his lack of enthusiasm had been clear. I had turned down the opportunity, telling myself that he was probably right, that it was not practical. "He never supported your ambitions," Amy said gently. "He never encouraged you to grow or take risks or pursue things that excited you. He wanted you to stay exactly as you were when he met you. Safe, predictable, undemanding." Her words hit me hard because they were true. I had felt it myself, but had never articulated it, even in my own mind. David had wanted a wife who fit neatly into his life without disrupting it, who asked nothing of him beyond basic companionship and household partnership. And the worst part, Amy continued, is that I watched you become smaller and quieter over the years. You used to be so passionate about teaching, about making a difference in kids' lives. You used to talk about maybe writing educational materials or starting tutoring programs. You had dreams, but somewhere along the way, you stopped talking about them. You stopped believing in them. You convinced yourself that being comfortable was enough. Tears were streaming down my face now. Why did you not say something? I asked. Why did you let me marry him if you felt this way? Amy's eyes filled with tears too. Because you seemed happy. Or at least you told everyone you were happy. And I kept thinking maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was seeing problems that did not exist. I did not want to be the difficult sister who ruined your wedding or caused problems in your marriage. I kept hoping that I would see something change, that I would see David really love you the way you deserved, but it never happened. We sat together in silence for a few minutes, both of us crying. Finally, Amy said, I am sorry I did not say something sooner. I should have been honest. With you. But I am telling you now because I want you to know that you deserve so much better than what David gave you. This is not your failure, Jennifer. This is his. I wanted to believe her. But years of conditioning were hard to overcome. What if he is right? I said. What if I am just not lovable in that deep, passionate way? What if there is something fundamentally lacking in me? Amy grabbed my shoulders and looked directly into my eyes. Stop. Do not let his inability to love you make you question your worth. There is nothing wrong with you. You are smart, kind, talented, beautiful. Any man would be lucky to have you. David was just too emotionally limited to recognize what he had. Before I could respond, there was a knock on the door. A young woman in her mid-20s stood in the doorway, looking uncertain. She had blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail, and was wearing jeans and a cardigan. She looked vaguely familiar, but I could not place her. I am sorry to interrupt, she said. Are you Jennifer Morrison? Yes, I said, confused. Who are you? The woman stepped into the room, and I saw that her hands were shaking. My name is Rachel Foster. I work at the same firm as your husband. I need to talk to you about something. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. Amy's hand tightened around mine. What about? I asked. Rachel looked at Amy, and then back at me. Maybe we should talk alone. Whatever you need to say, you can say in front of my sister, I said. Rachel nodded and took a deep breath. She seemed to be gathering courage. I have been struggling with whether to come here, whether to tell you this, but I think you have a right to know. Your husband and I have been involved for the past 8 months. The words hung in the air between us. I heard them, understood them intellectually, but they did not seem real. Amy made a small sound beside me, something between a gasp and a growl. Involved, I repeated numbly. You mean having an affair? Rachel's face crumpled. Yes. I am so sorry. I know that is not an excuse, and I take full responsibility for my part in it. But I thought you should know the truth, especially after what happened. Yesterday. What happened yesterday? Amy demanded, her voice sharp. Rachel looked at me with something that might have been pity. David came back to the office after visiting you at the hospital. He was upset, said he had finally told you the truth about his feelings. He told several people that he had ended things with you, that he was planning to move out. He seemed relieved, like a weight had been lifted off him, and he called me, asked if he could come over to my apartment. The room seemed to tilt. So David had not gone home after leaving the hospital. He had not spent the night reflecting on what he had done, feeling remorse or conflict. He had gone directly to another woman, to this woman standing in front of me. I said no, Rachel continued quickly. I told him I did not want to see him anymore. That is why I am here. I ended things with him last night, and I have been up all night thinking about everything. I realized that what we did was wrong, and you deserve to know the truth. You deserve to know that his confession to you was not some sudden realization or moment of honesty. He was preparing the ground to leave you for me. Amy stood up abruptly. Get out, she said to Rachel, her voice cold with fury. You do not get to come in here and unload your guilt onto my sister while she is lying in a hospital bed. You want forgiveness? You want to feel better about yourself? Go find a therapist. Get out. Rachel looked stricken but nodded. I understand. I am sorry, Jennifer. I truly am. She turned and left quickly, her footsteps echoing down the hallway. Amy turned back to me, her face flushed with anger. That coward. That absolute coward. He was having an affair, and he had the nerve to make you feel like the marriage. Failing was somehow a mutual problem, like it was about compatibility and timing and all that garbage. He was cheating on you, Jennifer. While you were working and building a home and being a loyal wife, He was sleeping with some woman from his office. The anger in Amy's voice finally penetrated the numbness I had been feeling. Something inside me shifted. All the sadness and self-doubt I had been experiencing since David's confession began transforming into something else, something hotter and sharper. Rage. Pure, burning rage. "How dare he?" I said quietly, and my voice did not sound like my own. How dare he make me feel like I was inadequate, like I was somehow responsible for his unhappiness? How dare he visit me in a hospital and lecture me about honesty and truth when he was lying to my face the entire time? Amy sat back down beside me, and I saw satisfaction in her eyes. "There she is," she said. "There is my sister." I was wondering when she would show up. "For 8 months, I continued, my voice getting stronger. "For 8 months, he was with someone else, while we were having dinner together, while we were sleeping in the same bed, while we were going to family gatherings and pretending everything was normal. He was living a double life, and I had no idea. I thought about all the times. David had worked late over the past several months. All the business dinners and networking events he had claimed he needed to attend. All the weekend hours he had spent at the office, supposedly catching up on projects. I had believed every excuse, never questioning, never suspecting. I thought about the distance I had felt between us, the lack of intimacy, the way he had seemed distracted and distant. I had blamed myself, wondered what I was doing wrong, considered marriage counseling, and the whole time, he had been getting his emotional and physical needs met elsewhere. The absolute betrayal of it was staggering. My phone buzzed on the table beside the bed. I picked it up and saw a text message from David. "We need to discuss logistics. When will you be released from the hospital? I can arrange to get my things from the house when you are not there." The casual tone of the message, the business-like efficiency of it all, made my rage intensify. He was already moving forward, already planning his exit, already thinking about logistics and arrangements. There was no apology, no acknowledgement of the pain he had caused, no recognition that he had blown up my entire life with his selfishness. "I want to go home," I told Amy. "Right now, I do not care what the doctors say. I want to go home." Amy looked concerned. "Jennifer, you need to wait until you are properly discharged. You need to follow medical advice." "I am fine," I said firmly. "Dr. Martinez said I could probably go home tomorrow anyway. I am going home today. I am not going to lie in this hospital bed one more minute, feeling sorry for myself while David dismantles our life and moves on like none of this matters." "What are you going to do?" Amy asked. "I am going to take control of my own life," I said. "I am going to stop being passive and accommodating. I am going to stop making excuses for a man who does not deserve my loyalty or my kindness. I am going to figure out exactly what I want, and I am going to fight for it." Amy smiled, and it was fierce. "Now you are talking. What do you need from me? I need you to help me get discharged today. Talk to the nurses. Find out what forms I need to sign. Make whatever. Arrangements need to be made. And then I need you to take me home. Not to call David, not to coordinate with him. Just take me straight home." Amy nodded. "Consider it done. What else?" I thought for a moment. Then I said, "I need you to help me find a good lawyer. The best divorce lawyer in Portland. Because if David thinks he is going to walk away from this marriage without consequences, he is very, very wrong." As Amy left to find the nurses and start the discharge process, I sat in the hospital bed and felt something I had not felt in years. Determination, clarity, purpose. David had spent 7 years of our marriage giving me the bare minimum, treating me like a convenient accessory to his life rather than a true partner. He had cheated on me, lied to me, and then had the audacity to make me feel like our problems were somehow my fault or a result of mutual incompatibility. But his biggest mistake had been underestimating me. He had assumed I would be devastated and passive, that I would quietly accept whatever arrangements he proposed, that I would make things easy for him. He was about to learn otherwise. I picked up my phone and typed a response to his text message. "Do not come to the house. I will be home today, and I do not want to see you. Any communication from this point forward should go through my attorney. You will be hearing from them soon." I hit send and felt a surge of satisfaction. This was just the beginning. David thought he had been honest by confessing his lack of feelings for me, but true honesty was about to arrive. and it was going to be far more uncomfortable than anything he had anticipated. I had spent years being accommodating, understanding, willing to sacrifice my own needs for the sake of keeping peace and maintaining our comfortable life together. That version of Jennifer was gone. David's confession and Rachel's revelation had burned away whatever remained of my willingness to accept less than I deserved. A new version of Jennifer was emerging, one who was angry, determined, and absolutely done with being underestimated, and David Morrison had no idea what was coming. Amy managed to get me discharged by early afternoon. Dr. Martinez was hesitant at first, concerned that I was leaving too soon, but I assured her I would follow all the prescribed treatment protocols and attend the scheduled follow-up appointments. She finally agreed, though she made me promise to rest and not overexert myself. The drive home felt surreal. Amy drove my car, which she had picked up from the hospital parking lot where I had left it 3 days earlier when the pain had become unbearable, and I had checked myself into the emergency room. Portland looked exactly the same as it had before my world had fallen apart. The same gray clouds overhead, the same rain-dampened streets, the same people going about their normal lives. But everything felt different to me now. When we pulled into the driveway of the house I had shared with David, I felt a strange disconnect. This place that had been my home for the past 4 years suddenly felt like foreign territory. The gray siding that we had chosen together, the black front door that David had repainted last summer, the small garden where I had planted roses that never quite thrived in Portland's climate. It all looked the same, but it no longer felt like mine. "Are you sure you want to go in?" Amy asked gently, turning off the engine. "You could stay with me for a few days. Give yourself some distance." "I need to do this," I said. "This is still my house. I'm not going to let him drive me out of my own home." We walked to the front door, and I fumbled with my keys. My hands were shaking slightly, though whether from lingering weakness from my hospital stay or from emotion, I was not sure. When I finally got the door open, I stepped inside and immediately noticed things were different. David had already been here, several of his jackets were missing from the coat closet by the entrance. His work shoes that normally sat by the door were gone. I walked further into the house, Amy following quietly behind me, and saw more evidence of his hasty departure. His laptop was missing from the home office. Drawers in our bedroom stood partially open, emptied of his clothing. His toiletries were gone from the bathroom. He had wasted no time, less than 24 hours. After his confession in my hospital room, he had already begun extracting himself from our life together. The speed of it stung. Even though I knew our marriage was over, even though I was angry at him, there was something painful about seeing how easily he could walk away, how few items he needed to take with him to establish a separate life. Amy found me standing in the bedroom, staring at the empty spaces in the closet where David's clothes had hung. She put her arm around my shoulders. "He is an idiot," she said. "He has no idea what he is giving up." I leaned into her embrace for a moment, then straightened up. "I need to make some calls," I said. "Can you help me?" "Of course. What do you need?" Over the next few hours, Amy and I worked methodically. First, I called the divorce attorney that Amy had researched during my hospital discharge process. Her name was Patricia Chen, and she had a reputation as one of the toughest divorce lawyers in Portland. Her assistant scheduled an emergency consultation for the following Monday. Then I called the bank. I explained that I needed to understand all our joint accounts, our assets, our financial situation. The representative was professional and helpful, walking me through everything over the phone and promising to send detailed statements to my email address. Next, I went through the house with a notebook, documenting everything. I took photos of every room, every piece of furniture, every valuable item. Amy helped me create a detailed inventory. I was not going to let David claim later that he had no idea what was in the house or what belonged to whom. While we worked, my phone buzzed repeatedly with text messages from David. At first, I ignored them, but they became increasingly insistent. "Jennifer, we need to talk. This is ridiculous. You cannot shut me out of my own house. I have a right to my belongings. I am trying to be reasonable here. Why are you making this difficult?" After the 7th message, I finally responded. "I already told you. All communication goes through my attorney. You will receive her contact information early next week. Do not contact me directly again." His response came immediately. "You are being childish. This does not have to be ugly. We can handle this like adults." I stared at the message, feeling my anger spike again. Like adults. He had the nerve to lecture me about maturity after cheating on me for 8 months, and then confessing his lack of feelings while I was hospitalized and vulnerable. I typed back, "You made it ugly when you betrayed me. You made it ugly when you lied to me for months. You made it ugly when you chose to end our marriage in a hospital room. I am simply dealing with the situation you created. Goodbye, David." I blocked his number after that. I did not need to hear any more of his justifications or attempts to control the narrative. He had lost the right to direct access to me. Amy ordered takeout for dinner, Thai food from a restaurant we both loved. We ate on the couch in the living room, and for a little, we just talked about other things. She told me about her job at the marketing firm, about the new campaign she was working on, about a guy she had gone on a few dates with. Normal conversation, ordinary life. A reminder that the world kept turning even when your personal world was falling apart. After dinner, Amy looked at me seriously. "So what is your plan? Beyond the divorce, I mean. What do you want?" I had been thinking about that question all afternoon. "I want to teach," I said, "but not just in the classroom. I want to develop curriculum. Maybe start that tutoring program I used to dream about. I want to write educational materials that actually help kids learn. I want to do work that matters, not just collect a paycheck. Those are the things you talked about when you first started teaching," Amy said with a smile. Before David, I agreed. I let him make me smaller. I let him convince me that practical and safe were more important than passionate and meaningful. I am not going to do that anymore. "What else?" Amy prompted. "I want to travel," I said. "Real travel, not just resort vacations. I want to go to places that challenge me and teach me things. I want to see the world, not just check off tourist attractions." Amy nodded enthusiastically. "I have been trying to get you to travel with me for years." "I know," I said. I always had excuses. David did not want to use his vacation time that way. It was too expensive. It was not practical. But those were not real reasons. The real reason was that I was afraid of stepping outside my comfortable routine, afraid of wanting things that David did not want, afraid of being different from the person I thought I was supposed to be. "And now?" Amy asked. "Now I am more afraid of staying small," I said. "I am more afraid of reaching the end of my life and realizing I never really lived it." We talked late into the night, planning and dreaming. Amy promised to help me research curriculum development opportunities and educational consulting positions. She pulled up websites for volunteer programs abroad, teaching opportunities in different countries, adventures I had never allowed myself to consider. By the time Amy left close to midnight, I felt exhausted but also strangely energized. For the first time in years, I felt like I was moving towards something, rather than just maintaining the status quo. The house felt empty after she left. I walked through the rooms, seeing them with new eyes. This had been my home, but it had never really been mine. I had decorated according to David's preferences, chosen furniture he approved of, arranged everything to accommodate his needs and habits. What would a home that was truly mine look like? What colors would I choose if I did not have to consider anyone else's opinion? What furniture would I select if I could follow my own taste? What kind of space would I create if I allowed myself to be fully authentic? I spent the weekend in quiet preparation. I researched divorce proceedings, educated myself about my rights, made lists of questions for my attorney. I went through financial documents, organized paperwork, created folders and files. I was building a case, gathering ammunition, preparing for battle, but I was also doing something else. I was rediscovering parts of myself that had been dormant for years. I went through boxes in the garage that I had not opened since we moved into this house. I found notebooks full of lesson plans I had created early in my teaching career, creative approaches to education that I had abandoned as impractical. I found journals where I had written about my dreams and goals, hopes I had stopped articulating years ago. I spent Sunday afternoon in the small reading nook I had set up when we first moved in, the one I rarely used anymore because I had gotten too busy with practical matters. I read through old journals, reconnecting with the younger version of myself who had been so full of enthusiasm and ambition. One entry particularly struck me. It was from about 6 months before David proposed. I had written about feeling like I was at a crossroads, sensing that my relationship with David was moving toward a more serious commitment, but feeling uncertain about whether it was what I truly wanted. I had written, "Sometimes I wonder if I am choosing safety over passion, comfort over excitement. Is that wise or cowardly? I do not know." Reading those words now, I felt a pang of sadness for that younger Jennifer. She had sensed the truth, but had talked herself out of listening to her instincts. She had convinced herself that practical love was better than passionate love, that stability was more important than genuine connection. But I was not going to make that mistake again. I was done ignoring my instincts, done settling for less than I deserved, done making myself smaller to fit into someone else's idea of who I should be. On Monday morning, I dressed carefully for my meeting with Patricia Chen. I chose a navy blue suit that made me feel professional and powerful. I styled my hair, applied makeup with more care than I had in months, and looked at myself in the mirror. I looked different, stronger, more determined. Patricia. Chen's office was in a modern building in downtown Portland. The reception area was sleek and professional, with contemporary art on the walls and comfortable leather chairs. When Patricia came out to greet me, I was immediately impressed. She was a woman in her mid-50s, impeccably dressed, with sharp eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. We sat in her office, and I told her everything. About David's confession in the hospital, about Rachel's revelation, about the 8 months of infidelity, about David's swift departure from our home. Patricia took notes, asked pointed questions, and listened without judgment. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and looked at me directly. "Jennifer, I need to be honest with you. This is going to be difficult. Oregon is a no-fault divorce state, which means the affair, as painful as it is, will not directly impact the divorce settlement. However, the fact that he was having a relationship with a coworker could be relevant if you pursue certain strategies." "What kind of strategies?" I asked. Patricia smiled, and there was something almost predatory in it. "Well, if Rachel Foster is willing to provide testimony about the relationship, that could be useful in establishing a pattern of dishonesty. More importantly, I want to look closely at your financial situation. You mentioned David is a financial analyst. I want to make absolutely certain that all assets are properly disclosed, that there are no hidden accounts or questionable transactions. You think he might be hiding money?" I asked. "I think it is worth investigating thoroughly," Patricia said. "In my experience, people who are willing to lie to their spouse about an affair are often willing to lie about other things as well. We are going to request complete financial disclosure. Go through every account, every investment, every transaction for the past several years." Over the next hour, Patricia outlined a comprehensive strategy. We would file for divorce immediately, requesting full financial disclosure. We would document everything about the marriage, the house, the assets. We would gather evidence of David's affair, not necessarily to use in court, but to have leverage in negotiations. We would make sure I walked away from this marriage with everything I was entitled to, and then some. "I also want you to think about what you really want from this," Patricia said as our meeting was wrapping up. "Not just financially, but personally. This is your opportunity to reset your life. Do not just think about what you are entitled to under the law. Think about what you need to move forward on to build the life you actually want." As I left Patricia's office, I felt a sense of purpose I had not experienced in years. I was taking action, taking control, refusing to be a passive victim of circumstance. Over the next 2 weeks, things moved quickly. Patricia's office filed divorce papers and sent David a comprehensive request for financial disclosure. His attorney responded with the expected protestations, claiming we were being unreasonable and aggressive. But something interesting happened during those 2 weeks. I started hearing things through the grapevine. Sarah, my friend who had introduced me to David, called to tell me that people were talking. Apparently, David's relationship with Rachel had become office gossip. Several people at his firm had known about the affair and had lost respect for David because of it. Then I got an unexpected call from David's boss, a man named Richard, whom I had met at several company events over the years. He asked if we could meet for coffee. I was suspicious but curious, so I agreed. Richard was in his early 60s, a serious man with gray hair and a thoughtful demeanor. We met at a quiet coffee shop, and he got straight to the point. "Jennifer, I want to apologize," he said. "I found out about David's relationship with Rachel about 3 months ago. I should have said something to you then, but I convinced myself it was not my place to get involved in employees' and personal lives. I regret that decision now. I appreciated his honesty, but I was not sure why he was telling me this." He continued, "I also want you to know that David's behavior has consequences beyond his personal life. Our firm has strict policies about workplace relationships, particularly when they involve deception or create conflicts of interest. David and Rachel have both been placed on administrative leave while we investigate potential policy violations. I had not expected that. David prided himself on his professional reputation, on being seen as ethical and reliable in his career. The idea that his affair might damage his standing at work had probably never occurred to him. There is something else," Richard said, looking uncomfortable. "In the process of investigating the workplace relationship, our internal audit team found some irregularities in David's expense reports. Nothing criminal, but evidence that he has been using company resources for personal matters, including activities related to his relationship with Rachel. Dinners charged to business accounts that were actually dates. Hotel rooms booked for supposed business trips that were actually personal. We are going to be requiring him to reimburse the company for these inappropriate charges. I processed this information. David's perfect professional image was crumbling. His affair had not only ended our marriage, but was also jeopardizing his career." Richard leaned forward. "Jennifer, I want you to know that if you need a character witness for divorce proceedings, or if your attorney needs documentation of David's behavior patterns, I am willing to help. What he did was wrong on multiple levels, and I believe there should be accountability." I thanked him and left the coffee shop with a strange feeling. I had not sought revenge. I had simply started protecting myself, claiming what was rightfully mine, refusing to be passive. But somehow, the truth about David's character was revealing itself in ways I could not have predicted or orchestrated. That evening, I received an email from my principal at school. She had heard through mutual contacts that I was going through a difficult time, and she wanted me to know that the literacy program leadership position was still available if I was interested. The teacher who had taken it had decided to relocate to another state, and they were looking for someone with vision and dedication to revitalize the program. I read the email 3 times, feeling something like hope stirring in my chest. This was the opportunity I had turned down years ago, because David had not been supportive, because I had convinced myself it was not practical. Now it was being offered again, and this time I had no one to hold me back but myself. I replied to my principal's email immediately. "I would love to discuss the position. Thank you for thinking of me." As I hit send, I realized something important. David had thought he was winning. He had confessed his feelings, left our home, moved on quickly with Rachel. In his mind, he had taken control of the situation, had been honest and direct about what he wanted, but he had underestimated the ripple effects of his choices. He had not considered how his actions would look to others, how his professional reputation would suffer, how his carefully constructed life would unravel once the truth came out. And he had certainly underestimated me. He had assumed I would be devastated and defeated, that I would quietly accept whatever arrangement he proposed. He had thought of me as small and passive, someone who would not fight back. He was very, very wrong about that. I was not fighting because I wanted revenge. I was fighting because I deserved better. I was fighting because I had value that he had failed to recognize. I was fighting because the version of myself I had been during our marriage was not who I truly was, and I was determined to reclaim the person I had been before I had let someone else define me. David thought he had ended our marriage on his terms, but the real ending was only just beginning, and he had no idea what was coming. 6 weeks after David's confession in the hospital, I sat across from him in a conference room at Patricia Chen's law office. It was the first time I had seen him in person since that terrible day, and I was surprised by how little I felt. No longing, no sadness, no residual affection, just a cold clarity about who he really was. David looked different. The confident, put-together professional I had known was gone. He looked tired, with dark circles under his eyes, and a tension in his shoulders that suggested things were not going well for him. His attorney, a thin man, named Gerald with wire-rimmed glasses, sat beside him shuffling papers nervously. Patricia sat next to me, calm and composed, with several thick folders in front of her. She had spent the past weeks building our case meticulously, and I knew from our previous conversations that she had found things even I had not expected. "Shall we begin?" Patricia said, her voice pleasant, but with an edge of steel underneath. Gerald cleared his throat. "My client believes we can reach an equitable settlement without unnecessary conflict. He is prepared to offer a 50-50 split of all marital assets, which is more than fair, given that Oregon is a no-fault state." Patricia smiled, and I recognized that smile. It was the smile of someone holding all the winning cards. "Before we discuss settlements, I think we need to address some concerns about full financial disclosure. Mr. Morrison, are you familiar with account number ending in 7734 at Pacific Trust Bank?" David's face went pale. I watched the color literally drain from his cheeks. "That is a business account," he said quickly, "for potential investment opportunities." "Really?" Patricia said, opening one of her folders. "Because according to the bank records we subpoenaed, this account was opened 3 years ago, and you are the sole account holder. It currently contains approximately $87,000, money that was systematically transferred from your joint checking account with Jennifer in small increments that you apparently hoped would not be noticed." The room was silent. I stared at David, feeling a wave of disgust. He had not just betrayed me emotionally. He had been stealing from me, hiding money, planning his exit for years while I had been completely oblivious. "There must be some mistake," David stammered. "I can explain." "Please do," Patricia said. "I am very interested in hearing how you explain moving marital funds into a secret account without your wife's knowledge or consent." David looked at Gerald desperately, but his attorney had no answer. "Those funds were from my bonuses," David finally said. "My personal earnings, which were earned during your marriage, making them marital property." Patricia replied smoothly. "But let us move on. I also have documentation of several other concerning financial transactions. For instance, the $15,000 you withdrew from your joint savings account 2 weeks before you confessed to Jennifer in the hospital. Where did that money go, Mr. Morrison?" David said nothing. He just sat there, looking cornered and desperate. "I will tell you where it went," Patricia continued. $5,000 went to a jewelry store, where you purchased a rather expensive bracelet. For Rachel Foster, I assume. Another $8,000 went to a luxury hotel in Seattle, where you and Mr. Foster spent a weekend while telling Jennifer you were at a financial conference. The remaining $2,000 covered various dinners and expenses related to your affair. I felt sick hearing the details laid out so clinically. While I had been at home, being a loyal wife, planning our future together, David had been spending our money on his mistress. The betrayal was so complete, so thorough, that it almost defied comprehension. But Patricia was not finished. "And then there is the matter of your employment situation, Mr. Morrison. I understand you are currently suspended from your position, pending an investigation into misuse of company resources. How is that likely to impact your earning capacity?" David's jaw clenched. "That situation has been blown out of proportion. It will be resolved." "Really?" Patricia said. "Because I spoke with Richard Stevens, your former supervisor, and he indicated that the firm is considering termination. Something about a pattern of deception and ethical violations that they find incompatible with the fiduciary responsibilities of your position." Gerald held up a hand. "This is not relevant to the divorce proceedings. On the contrary," Patricia said, "it is extremely relevant to discussions about spousal support and division of assets. Mr. Morrison's reduced earning capacity, which is a direct result of his own misconduct, does not entitle him to a more favorable settlement." She pulled out another document. "Now, let us discuss what Jennifer is actually entitled to. Given the hidden assets, the dissipation of marital funds for extramarital affairs, and Mr. Morrison's pattern of financial deception, we are demanding the following. Jennifer receives the marital home, free and clear. Jennifer receives 70% of all remaining marital assets, including the funds in the hidden account. Jennifer receives spousal support for a period of 3 years while she pursues career advancement opportunities that she postponed during the marriage." "That is outrageous," David burst out. "You cannot expect me to agree to that." Patricia looked at him coolly. Mr. Morrison, you can agree to these terms, or we can go to court and let a judge review all the evidence of your financial misconduct, your affair, your deception. I assure you, judges do not look kindly on spouses who hide assets and steal from joint accounts. You may live in a no-fault divorce state, but financial fraud is still very much relevant to property division. David looked at Gerald desperately. His attorney sighed and said quietly, David, I think you should seriously consider this offer. If we go to trial with this evidence, you could end up with far less. The hidden account alone is going to be a major problem. I watched David's face as the reality of his situation sank in. He had thought he was so clever, so careful. He had planned his exit, hidden money, prepared for his new life with Rachel. But he had underestimated the consequences of his actions. There is one more thing, I said, speaking for the first time since the meeting began. Everyone turned to look at me. I want a full, written apology. I want you to acknowledge that you deceived me, betrayed me, and stole from me. I want it in writing, signed and dated. Jennifer. Gerald started to object, but I cut him off. No, I said firmly. This is non-negotiable. I do not care about his excuses or his justifications. I want acknowledgement of what he did. If he wants to settle this quickly and quietly, that is the price. David stared at me, and I saw something in his eyes I had never seen before. Fear. He was genuinely afraid of me, of what I might do, of how much power I actually had in this situation. Fine, he said quietly. I will write it. The meeting continued for another hour, hammering out the details. In the end, David agreed to everything. The house was mine. 70% of the assets were mine. Spousal support for 3 years, and most importantly, his written admission of guilt, his acknowledgement of his betrayal. As we were packing up to leave, David tried one last time to speak to me directly. Jennifer, please, can we talk for just a moment? Alone? I looked at him, this man I had spent 7 years of my life with, and felt nothing but pity. We have nothing to say to each other, David. You made your choices, and now you are living with the consequences. Goodbye. Patricia and I left the conference room together. In the elevator, she turned to me with genuine admiration in her eyes. You did well in there. Many people would have been emotional or angry, but you stayed focused. You knew exactly what you wanted. I learned something important, I said. Revenge is not about anger or hatred. It is about justice. It is about claiming what you deserve and refusing to accept less. 2 months later, the divorce was finalized. I stood in front of my house now, with a paintbrush in my hand. I was repainting the front door, not black like David had chosen, but a warm, welcoming red that I had always loved, but had never suggested because I knew he would not approve. Amy was helping me, rolling paint onto the door while I carefully edged around the frame. This color is perfect, she said. Very you. I smiled. Everything about this house is about to become very me, and it did. Over the following weeks, I transformed the space. I repainted walls in colors I loved. I bought new furniture that reflected my taste, not David's. I turned his office into a creative workspace where I developed curriculum materials and wrote educational resources. I planted new flowers in the garden, choosing varieties that actually thrived in Portland's climate instead of the ones David had insisted on. But more than the physical changes to the house, I was changing myself. The literacy program at school was flourishing under my leadership. I had developed innovative new approaches to teaching, reading comprehension, and my principal had already asked me to present my methods at a state education conference. I had also started writing, not just lesson plans and curriculum guides, but a book about educational theory and practice. It was something I had dreamed about for years, but had never allowed myself to pursue. Now, I worked on it every evening, and the words flowed easily because I was finally writing about something I was genuinely passionate about. 3 months after the divorce was finalized, I got an unexpected letter. It was from Rachel Foster. I almost threw it away without opening it, but curiosity got the better of me. The letter was short and handwritten. She wrote that she and David had tried to make their relationship work after everything fell apart, but it had not lasted more than a few weeks. Without the excitement of secrecy and forbidden, romance, they had discovered they had nothing real in common. David had become bitter and angry. blaming everyone but himself for how his life had turned out. Rachel had finally ended things completely and left the financial firm to start over somewhere new. She wrote that she had learned a difficult lesson about integrity and the cost of betrayal. She said she hoped I was finding happiness and peace. She said she was truly sorry for her. Pardon everything that had happened. I read the letter twice, then folded it and put it in a drawer. I did not feel anger toward Rachel anymore. She had been foolish and selfish, but she was young and had clearly learned from her mistakes. David had been the one who made vows to me, who owed me loyalty, who had betrayed everything we had built together. And David, from what I heard through mutual acquaintances, was struggling. He had, indeed, been fired from his firm. He had taken a new position at a smaller company for significantly less pay. He was living in a small apartment and, according to Sarah, seemed isolated and unhappy. I did not take pleasure in his suffering, but I did feel a sense of justice in knowing that actions have consequences, that you cannot betray people without cost, that integrity matters. 6 months after the divorce, I did something I had dreamed about for years. I booked a trip to Costa Rica to volunteer at a school that taught English to children in underserved communities. It was a 3-week program, and I would be developing curriculum and training local teachers. Amy drove me to the airport, excited and proud. "This is amazing," she said as we said goodbye at the departure gate. "You are actually doing it. You are living the life you always wanted." "I am," I agreed, "and it feels incredible." On the plane, as we lifted off from Portland and headed south, I looked down at the city that had been my home for so long. Somewhere down there, David was living his diminished life, dealing with the consequences of his choices. Somewhere down there was the hospital room where he had tried to break me with his confession, but he had not broken me. If anything, he had freed me. His betrayal had been the catalyst I needed to reclaim myself, to remember who I was before I had made myself small to fit into his life. I pulled out my journal, the same journal where I had written years ago about choosing safety over passion. On a fresh page, I wrote, "Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the best thing that ever happened to you. Sometimes betrayal is actually liberation. Sometimes when someone shows you who they really are, they give you the greatest gift possible, the gift of truth and the opportunity to build something better." I thought about the woman I had been 6 months ago, lying in that hospital bed, hearing words that shattered my world. If I could go back and talk to her, what would I say? I would tell her that she was stronger than she knew, that the pain she was feeling would transform into power, that the betrayal would lead to freedom, that the ending of her marriage would be the beginning of her real life. I would tell her that David's inability to love her had nothing to do with her worth and everything to do with his limitations, that she deserved more than she had settled for, and that she would find it, not in another person, but in herself. I would tell her that the future held adventure, purpose, passion, and joy, that she would rediscover dreams she had abandoned, and pursue them with determination, that she would create a life that was authentically hers, not a compromise or a performance. But most of all, I would tell her what I now knew with absolute certainty. You are enough. You have always been enough. And you are about to discover just how extraordinary you truly are. As the plane climbed higher, breaking through the clouds into brilliant sunshine, I smiled. The old Jennifer, the one who had accepted less than she deserved, who had made herself small, who had lived in fear of disrupting her comfortable but unfulfilling life, was gone. In her place was someone new, someone brave, determined, passionate, and free. Someone who had turned betrayal into triumph, pain into power, and ending into beginning. Someone who had won, not by destroying her enemy, but by refusing to be destroyed herself. The flight attendant came, by offering drinks. I ordered champagne, something I never would have done before. When she brought it, I raised the plastic cup in a silent toast. To new beginnings, to truth, to freedom, to becoming who you were always meant to be. I drank, and the future stretched out before me, full of possibility and promise. David had thought he was destroying our marriage when he made his confession in that hospital room, but what he had actually destroyed was the illusion that had been holding me back. He had destroyed my willingness to settle, my fear of claiming what I deserved, my acceptance of being less than I was capable of being. And from that destruction, I had built something far more valuable than the marriage we had shared. I had built a life that was genuinely, authentically, powerfully mine. That was the real victory, not the divorce settlement, not his professional struggles, not the house or the money or even the written apology. The real victory was this. I had reclaimed myself, and nothing David had done, no betrayal or deception or cruelty, could ever take that away from me. The plane leveled off, and I opened my laptop to work on my book. I had a chapter to finish before we landed. I had students waiting in Costa Rica who needed my expertise. I had a life to live, and I was not going to waste another moment. Behind me was the past, with all its pain and disappointment. Ahead of me was the future, unlimited and bright, and I was ready for all of it.